Hi, I'm Rob Cosman. Welcome to my shop. I want to show you a project that we recently completed. This was done in our hand tool, power tool workshop, and it was it's a jewelry chest mounted on the wall that I built for my wife. Mind you, it took us actually over a year, and before you gasp, we would film an hour and a half each week, so 3 half-hour episodes. So that's why it stretched out. But we did a lot of changes too along the way. Modified and whatever. I like to kind of design on the fly. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how we mount it to the wall, and then I'll show you all the bits and pieces, and what I did might be a little bit different. That's a cleat. It's a dovetail cleat, so you can see the angle. So when mounted to the wall, it then I'll take the screw out, show you. Now, this is too narrow to get between two studs, so you have to figure out some other way of doing it. So one screw into the stud, and then there's a matching angle on the underside of this frame. So the first thing I'll do is put this, I just stuck a piece of 3/4 inch plywood up here to show you. So you put that on with a secure enough screw that it holds quite well. Level that. This is full, by the way. It's a bad thing about making your wife a big jewelry chest. You have to fill it. Now, once I get it leveled up, this drawer came out, and I put a single screw down in there that would hold it and keep it from, actually, I should do it right now just to prevent it from moving while we're working on it. That'll hold it in position. Okay, so it's made out of bird's eye and black walnut. And I want it to be rather clean, so not a lot of curves. Nice clean lines. Let the joinery show off and the contrast with the bird's eye. I used, when I did the drawer fronts, I had a flitch of bird's eye, so just in case you don't understand what that means, when they slice up veneer out of a solid piece of wood, they keep it all in order. So I had probably 3/4 of an inch of veneer. They would be maybe a 32nd of an inch thick, so that's a lot of slices. And I could take one piece and cut that same drawer front out of each piece, one right behind the other, so the pattern is almost identical on every one. I mean, this piece is only 6, 7 32nds of an inch away from that one, so the grain doesn't have much of a chance to change. A ton of work in a little project like this. In fact, there's more work than there would be in a big chest of drawers, because every one of these drawers is dovetailed on all 4 corners, half blinds on the front, through in the back. All right, let's start with the doors. So the idea was to keep this relatively compact, and I wanted to incorporate my wood hinge. So if you look over here on the side, now a wood hinge is simply made up out of a 1/4 inch dowel, and I use a core box bit. Now a core box bit is a router bit that cuts a half round. So I use a 1/4 inch core box bit to cut a half round. Of course, 1/2, actually it's 1/4 would be in the door, and 1/4 would be in the side. And then I turn a dowel long enough to include whatever I have to remove in order to make the 2 cuts, because this is in 3 pieces. And after I would turn it, I had to put it back on the lathe, and I would turn the round ends so that they would fit into the end of the slot that is cut by the core box bit. And then you drill a hole into the end of each end. Now I'll show you the little jig that I use to do that with. Right here. We sell these on our site. Something I invented 30 years ago. You put this in a drill. It has a 1/16 inch drill bit that goes through a little centered hole, and there's a couple of set screws that hold it in place. So you put that into your drill, and as that spins, you take your 1/4 inch dowel and you stick it in this 1/4 inch hole. Well, before it engages that drill bit down in there, it has a chance to center itself because of the 1/4 inch hole. Then you push it a little harder and it gives you a perfectly centered 16th inch diameter hole in the end of each piece. These exit holes just allow the shavings to clear. And then in between each section is a little piece of 1/4 inch by 16th inch welding rod. You put the whole thing together. Now before I cut it, I draw a line on there so that when I put it back together, I can use the line to align the grain once again. And if you look at this end, I did the same thing with this piece of wood. You can see how the grain continues, so I was just careful to separate it. Hand cut dovetails all across naturally. Anyway, when you put this in, you glue. The secret to doing this is you've got to assemble the whole thing, clamp it tight, then put the dowel in place. But the dowel has to be glued to both pieces. The entire dowel has to be glued at the same time. But you have to wax the part that you don't want glue to be in. So for instance on this one, the top section is glued to the case, the second section is glued to the door, and of course the bottom section is glued to the case. So you would put wax on this portion of that one, glue on this portion. That way if any glue were to creep over, it wouldn't seize the joint. And it operates nice and smooth. Did that on both sides, of course. Now inside, wanted to keep it compact, as I mentioned, but it had to be useful as well. So out here on the door, and I lined everything with leather. I have a really nice suede leather, black leather on the inside of the door. But in order to put these little turned knobs, and these are all turned out of bird's eye, and this is where you would hang bracelets and whatever, like you see. But the problem was that there isn't enough material in that little panel to make this secure enough. So I took some pieces of ebony, you'll see 3 of them, and I actually cut dovetails on the end to a piece of walnut, and then I cut it off close and put a little chamfer on there and glued this in place. Now it's only glued in place where the walnut actually makes contact with this side, so it was kind of tricky to do. But it gave me enough material in the ebony to secure these dowels when I drilled a hole in the ebony and then put the little stub tenon into the end of it. So that's the door. Now for here, in order to have bracelets or necklaces, I did the same thing back in there, you can see it. But in order to access this, what I did is I turned these on the lathe. So I took a piece of bird's eye and I turned these dowels with these little doohickey things, whatever you would call them. It looks the same on both ends, but it allows you to take it out and take your bracelet, your stuff off, pick whatever you want and put it back in. This is a piece of a brass rod, and again, I didn't have much room to secure it, so what I used these fish bits. You hear me talk about them a lot because I think they're the best drill bits I've ever used. They're made in Austria. They're so precise and so sharp, they just do a beautiful job. And the 3/16 one fit this brass perfectly. So I drilled a hole through the piece of ebony, cut a light chamfer on the back side of the ebony, and then I peened the brass to fill that little chamfer so that it wouldn't come out. And I think I put some cyanoacrylate in there to hold it, but I'm really relying on that flared back end of the brass filling that slight little countersink that I cut to keep that from ever coming out. So you can access whatever you want. Of course, there's 2 of them, one on either side. I put leather in the back panel, and I put leather on the side. Now I had to somehow stop because this piece right here, walnut, goes all the way to the back, and I had to have a nice, neat way to stop the leather. So this little walnut strip right here is what the door closes against, so it keeps it nice and neat. So I'll address the inside first, and then we'll talk about the outside parts of it. Same thing over here, and it just nothing different on this side than it was on that side. Now I'll show you the drawers. Now I've tried to do the drawers a little bit different each one. So this one just has, again, leather on the bottom. Now what I used for the interior parts was some yellow cedar, beautiful smelling stuff, lovely stuff to work. So these are all dovetailed together, and these are just little compartments. And this is dry fit, but it's a nice close fit. And you'll notice you don't want to have a sharp edge, so there's a chamfer on all these pieces, which means this cross piece had to be lower than the bottom of the chamfer, or else it would show up as a gap. and that's just a half lap. So there's part of a groove, part of a dado, or part of a slot cut in this piece, and the opposite part cut in this piece. So when you put one down on top of the other, and it just sits in there, rests, and you try to get them to fit really nice so that when you close it, it'll just close on a cushion of air. So that's that one, and the drawer construction is half blinds in the front, through dovetails in the back. I used Baltic birch, 1/8" Baltic birch plywood, and glued the leather to that and fit in a groove, and then a single brass screw that holds it in place. This one, just a little bigger spacing for larger jewelry. Save the best for the last. This one, the idea was for bangles or whatever you call these bracelets, and then I turned a little knob that would match the knobs on the case, and that would come out, and you have more room underneath. Now, when you did this, this is added on, so that little piece of walnut is added on both sides, and that just provides a little ledge for that to rest on. Again, chamfers cut all the way around just to make it nice to the touch. I think this one is just a regular one. I left it alone. Same thing with that one. This one just has a little sliding shelf that goes back and forth. Again, you got to join them somehow, so you may as well dovetail them. Same thing with that too. Just a little walnut shelf added to the bottom to allow that to slide on. That's another one that's just regular. Actually, I was planning on doing more to it. I just never get around to it. Now this is the one. This is the one I want to show you. So it had to have a nice way to hold rings in place. And I had seen this done before, but I didn't know how it was done. This is leather. So what I did is I got some of this weather stripping, this foam weather stripping, and I cut the pieces the right length. And then I took some 3/16" brass rod, and I would put a section of that in between each one of these pieces to help hold the leather down and to just keep it all nice and neat like it is. And then I simply cut the side. When I put the side pieces in, I cut this shape out, so when I put them down in there and glued it, it kind of held everything in place. But you could take that apart if you had to, but it won't come apart. And it just makes a really nice spot for a nice way of holding on to rings. Now, when we first did this, I didn't have these dividers in, so it was just one great big empty panel, one great big empty panel. And the more I looked at it, it just didn't quite seem right. So we played around quite a bit and added these in, and I think it really sets it off nice against this. I experimented a lot with where those knobs should be, whether they were going to be up here or down here, and I like the fact that they end up in the middle. And overall, I really like the look of the whole thing. I matched the size of the horizontal pieces on the doors with the case compared to the size of the pieces on the vertical pieces. And then this little piece of frame was actually added at the end. This wasn't going to be on there, but it just didn't look right. It needed to have something to set it off and just to hold it out from the wall a little bit. And I played around with that a lot too. I experimented with how much it should stick out, and this is where we ended up. It has an oil finish. I'm not sure how many coats of oil we put on it, but it was several. I like to use a product made by circa 1850. It's available in Canada. I don't know if it's available in the US or not, but it's a tung oil. Makes for a really nice finish. Goes on easily. There's probably 6 or 7 coats on there, but it leaves a fairly durable finish. Anyway, she was happy. And if you can keep Mama happy, then life is good. Now, if you're interested in this, it's if you go to RobCosman.com, actually you have to become a member to get access to all of it. But we went through and we videotaped, as I mentioned, the entire process. Now, the only thing we didn't do, or we did, if we were going to show the dovetailing of this corner, we wouldn't show this corner, this corner, and this corner. We might show this one. We might add a little different technique and do this one, but then the other two would be done off camera. Same thing with some of the drawers. We didn't show dovetailing every drawer. But even at that, there was a lot of episodes on there. So RobCosman.com, and that was in the Power Tool, Hand Tool membership workshop. And it's all indexed in there, so you can find all of this stuff. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. See you soon.